Hello there, and thank you. And I want to thank Nima in particular for inviting me. It's an honor for me to be here. I want you to know that I prepared. This is all my remarks, but there's a lot of big type. So don't get too scared, and I won't do all of it. I'm going to be talking about our work and what we do in moving beyond dialogue. So let's get started. You've heard that I'm the CEO of an organization called the Tannenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding. So whenever I say that to someone, the first thing I get is, I get the same response every single time. First, they want to know if we're a religious organization or a Jewish organization. The answer is no, we're not. We're secular and non-sectarian, and Tannenbaum doesn't promote religion, nor do we denigrate it. We simply address it. Next, they assume we do dialogue. Wrong again. It's not that I don't think dialogue is important. It is. It has a lot of value, and there are a lot of organizations that are interreligious focused that bring people together so that they'll know one another and change their hearts and minds. But that's not Tannenbaum. We'd be thrilled if we could change hearts and minds. But I'm not sure it's so easy, at least outside of the small rooms in which dialogue is held. That's why we focus on behavior and changing how people act and treat one another. So if you will, Tannenbaum's work is about taking the golden rule, which is in all of our traditions, and putting it into practice. So usually after I clear these things up, I then get this incredibly bewildered look. So if you're not religious and you don't do dialogue, what do you do? And so I tell them. If I'm in the elevator, it's a very easy answer. You know the elevator speech? Tannenbaum combats religious prejudice. That's what we do. But if I'm not in the elevator, and if I have the microphone like I do right now, I say a little more. What we really do is we address what I would say are real-life tensions and conflicts. We build on core beliefs, and we have 4 program areas. For me, Tannenbaum's about justice, and we do it by combating religious prejudice. Now that covers a whole range of behavior. So when I think of prejudice, what I think about is lack of information about other people's beliefs, ignorance, misinformation. It's behaviors on a continuum. Disinformation. We know there's disinformation. Bias, prejudice, harassment, bullying, discrimination, hate and hate crimes, and armed conflicts. That's what we work to combat. Religious prejudice writ large. Now these are all interrelated phenomena. And for now, when I talk about religious prejudice, I'm thinking about all of them. Although sometimes I'll talk about it as religious prejudice and hatred. These things are not always so obvious. But I am willing to bet that every single one of you in this room has experienced religious prejudice writ large at some point in your life. For me, it looks like a physical therapist who goes to work and is told he can't wear his large cross because when he works up with someone, it might dangle in their face and insult them. It's vicious name-calling about different religions, like those who have characterized Islam as the religion that worships the terrorist's monkey god. And it looks like efforts all over the U.S. where laws are being changed so that mosques can't be built. In Murfreesboro and in Bridgewater, New Jersey. Hatred is what happened in California a few years ago. It made the New York Times. Very small article. Most people didn't read it, and I'm sure most people don't remember it. So let me read something. 7 seniors at a Southern California high school were facing disciplinary action, it was reported, for participating in a game called Beat the Jew, in which losers were subjected to incineration or enslavement. The game involved some students playing Nazis, who blindfolded and dropped off other students playing Jews, who were to find their way back to the campus. This game, Beat the Jew, was promoted online, and 40 students got involved, although only 7 showed up. Only 7. That's what religious prejudice and hatred looks like in everyday life, and that's what we work to combat. It's in the battle zones in Syria, of course, where there are Christians who are afraid they're going to be targeted because of their Christianity, and where many Muslims are being killed in part because of the way they practice their faith. It's also in the Middle East and Nigeria, but it's here at home as well. So our work is about addressing the subtle and the very overt religious prejudice and hatred. We start with 3 premises, and I'm really curious whether you agree with me about our premises, so I'm going to ask you. And then we have 4 practical programs. So the premises first. First premise, religion is a powerful force. Anybody disagree? Okay, we're unanimous. The data supports this. 84% of people around the globe, depending on what study you follow, will tell you that religion is important in their lives. And what that means is that being a person who says religious is important is one of the most common identities that anyone can have. There are more people who say religious is important to them than there are men on the globe, or women. Second premise, and I think it's really obvious. Look around. Just look around. What do you see? What?
More women.
More women, yes. See more women? I also see people who look kind of different from each other. And that's our premise. That being different is normal. It's the norm. It's not an aberration. So we have to learn to live with those differences in everyday life. Even in homogeneous religious communities, it's not all the same. There are boys and girls. There are old and young. There are the healthy and the disabled. There are the more powerful and the less powerful. There are the orthodox and those who may believe or practice somewhat differently. In the U.S., we've been talking about differences and diversity for decades. We started with race, and then we went to gender. And the conversations expanded to include sexual orientation, ability status, age, and ethnicity. It's only recently, actually in the 21st century, that we've taken that 20th century conversation and started to apply it to one of our core identities, religion. At Tannenbaum, we tackle these issues, and we tackle the issues posed by those who are religious and those who are not. We're looking at the different belief systems, and our goal is to have respect for all people, whatever they believe. This is really very complicated work. So, how many religions do you think there are in the U.S.? Hands up, I need some guesses. Can't be wrong, or you can only be wrong.
110.
What?
110.
110. Good guess. Wrong, but good guess. Anybody else?
25.
25. Anybody else?
50.
50? 15?
75.
75. Ladies. Yes. Bingo! But it depends how you count. Because when you get to 200 religions, it means that everyone who's defined as Christian, whether you're Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, is considered one. There are over 4,500 different Christian religious traditions in the U.S. 4,500. That means that people are reading their texts differently and having different practices. And it gets more complicated than that, because it's not only that we have different religious traditions and that we interpret our religions differently, our scholars do. It's also that people practice differently, no matter what the scholars say. And so our work is about dealing with people where they're at, what they believe, and making sure that they're respected, no matter how they practice their faith. So our third foundational premise is something that's opposing propositions. How many of you would agree that religion is used as a cause of conflict? Okay. How many of you, it's not unanimous. There are some of you who don't think it's ever used to cause conflict. That's interesting. How many of you believe that religion can be a resource for understanding and respect? Well, we got to unanimity this time. We believe both. And so we focus on those who are using it as a resource for peace. So these are our premises. Religion is powerful. It's a powerful force. Differences, diversity is the norm. It's normal. And religion can be used as a source for conflict and for resolving prejudice and hate. That's why we address it, and we seek to promote that respect of different ways of believing. Do it through 4 programs. And most of the ways we train and work are what I would call, if you had to classify us, which is not so easy to do with Tannenbaum, I think you'd say we're an educational organization. In every way, we're trying to change how people act in different institutions and how things are conducted in our society. So I want to start with our education program. We used to call it the Religion and Diversity Education Program. It's a long name, but it actually meant something. Now we just call it the Education Program. But I'm going to explain to you why we have the old name. There are a lot of diversity education programs. There's a lot of diversity training for educators, multicultural education programs. They're available. Most of them don't mention religion, but even if they do, they don't generally include lessons about religion and how to teach it, about it. So we tackle that. And our education program is the multicultural education program plus religion. That's why it's called Religion and Diversity Education. So we help teachers teach students about religious differences. The program is different, and we know that it's needed. Look at all the bullying that's going on, and a lot of it has to do with religion, national identity, countries of origin. In a national study of the U.S., almost 30% of the kids over a 2-month period, adolescents who were studied, were bullied. And a good portion of them were both being bullied and bullying others. Anecdotes fill in the gaps where the research stops. We've had a teacher tell us about the kid, the Orthodox Jewish kid, who told a Christian child that his food was dirty because it wasn't kosher. It wasn't religiously pure. Another has told us about the Bangladeshi child who sat isolated and embarrassed about his country and his religion and didn't play with the others. And teachers tell us that they don't know what to do when a parent says, don't give my child any food in the after school because we're observing Ramadan and there's a birthday party for one of the kids. These are everyday conflicts that our education program works to reduce. We work and we focus on teachers and not the students for a particular reason. A teacher, in the course of his or her career, can reach thousands of students, and that's leverage. And our program starts with the Tannenbaum pedagogy. Now, I didn't know what a pedagogy was when I started working at Tannenbaum. So I'm going to explain it to the rest of you. Some of you know, some of you may not know. It's the methodology through which, it's the philosophy through which an educator does his or her work and how they teach. And Tannenbaum's pedagogy is designed to be used by teachers at every grade level and in every kind of subject. You can be teaching math, elementary school, science, or language arts, and you can infuse what we call the 7 principles for inclusive education. They're rarely part of regular teacher training programs in colleges, but you can use them easily. I'm going to go through them really quickly because of time. Teaching all students. What does that mean? Different students learn differently. Some learn by reading, some learn by watching you write on the board, some learn by having a conversation. So if you don't teach the same content using all those methods, you're going to miss some of your students. Exploring multiple identities. Remember, we're all different. We belong to different groups, lots of different groups. I'm a female, I'm a Jewish person, I'm also short, and there are plenty of us around. And we have individual identities. We're extroverts, we're introverts. Learning about these multiple identities, that they're normal. Preventing prejudice. Helping kids understand how to debunk stereotypes. To have their ears pick up when someone says, those people. You heard that ever? Those people? They? There are some key words worth listening to. Promoting social justice. Activities that can be done to do that, to promote fairness and how we act. Choosing appropriate materials. Well, what does that mean? So you get a curriculum. It's a wonderful curriculum. Teachers are going to use it. But the picture of Africa shows an elephant and a giraffe in the field. It shows someone half-dressed with war paint. It doesn't show someone in a business suit in Nairobi or a city. How are our kids going to know that Africa is not, in quotes, the dark continent, if we don't give them the information? Teaching and learning about cultures and religions. There are a lot of ways to do this, to embed this into all lessons. And finally, adapting whatever you're given and integrating it and meeting the needs of your class. Sounds very simple, these 7 principles. But learning how to do this and embedding it into your lessons is not so easy. That's why Tannenbaum provides intensive trainings, including week-long 36-hour courses for educators on the 7 principles and how to embed them in whatever they're teaching. Practical. When used regularly, with students who have teachers who use our principles, they learn what we would call global citizenship skills. And we've defined what we think they are. Well, first one, recognizing that differences are normal, not scary. Viewing them as interesting. Having what we call respectful curiosity. Knowing how to ask a question without demeaning somebody. Listening to the answer, having good listening skills. Knowing what a stereotype is, and knowing how to debunk it safely. And recognizing that there are a range of religions across the globe and a range of ways that people practice. Our goal is pretty lofty. It's to reach educators and students with these set of principles so that they end up being global citizens. And what we do is, in addition to our trainings, we provide materials. So I brought Chantel. You guys can look at this later if you want. It's one of our curricula. It embeds our principles in it. It's academic. It's called World Olympics. Happens to be very apt. It's for elementary school students. And the kids are telling us that when we do this work, it really helps them. So I have one boy, a young boy named Daniel, who went through that course, and so I went up to him and I said, Daniel, what did you learn? He was a first grader. And he said, I learned that making peace is being friends with everybody. I thought that was pretty cool. Do you remember the debate a few years ago about, and I'm going to put up quotes, the Ground Zero Mosque or Park 51? Well, that's the way Tannenbaum tries to provide practical resources through our education program. We got a call from a leading Muslim educator in California. She was very concerned that Muslim students were going to be bullied and beaten when they returned to school in September. And she said, can Tannenbaum do something? She said, I can't, because if I do it, I'm not going to have credibility. They're going to think it's self-serving materials. So I sat down with my staff and I said, okay, what can we do? And we decided, well, we can pull a little from this, we can do this, we can do it. And I said, yes. Little did I know that it was going to be 6 weeks of working round the clock and stopping everything else we were doing. But we created materials that we call our Park 51 materials. They're on our website. And they've had over 10,000 hits. And the Department of Education in New York City sent them to every principal that September to use in their schools. They're still useful, so I commend them to any educator who's interested. There's a lot that we're trying to do. And what keeps me going is imagining an entire system of educators, changing how education is conducted. Educators trained to teach their academic subjects with excellence and simultaneously embed lessons of respect for all differences, including religious differences. And imagining a generation of students who think that being different is neat, not scary. It's what they need for a global society. So that's our first program. A lot of kids go to school. That's why we do it. Second program is in the workplace. How many people here go to the workplace or have gone to the workplace over the course of their lives? All right, this is yours. Everywhere, managers and employees are increasingly diverse, including religiously diverse. Global companies have offices all over the world and clients who have different ways of believing and different needs and demands, creating different markets. In 1999, Tannenbaum did what I like to call our benchmarking survey. It was a national survey of U.S. employees weighted for people who, whose practices and beliefs were in minority traditions. The survey showed two things. First, there's plenty of religious bias in the workplace. And second, it affects the bottom line. So we used our findings to develop our workplace program. 2/3 of our respondents said that they could see evidence of religious bias at work. And at the same time that they were saying that, company leaders and human resources leaders were telling us we didn't know what we were talking about. Why? Because people don't complain. Of those who actually experienced religious bias, 3 out of 4 never told anyone. And of those who experienced it, they told us that how they were doing at work was really a problem. Their morale was down, half said their productivity was down, and nearly half were looking for new jobs. Since we did that survey, we've had 9/11, and we've seen a rising number of legal complaints based on religious discrimination. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, gets complaints on religious discrimination where we track what happens. In a 10-year period ending in 2011, Complaints based on religion increased by 95%. It's the fastest growing arena of complaints, although not the largest area of complaints. And those complaints cost companies money. It is not cheap to be biased against people based on religion. So AT&T had to pay $1.3 million for firing two Jehovah's Witnesses who went to a convention for Jehovah's Witnesses. They had asked for permission and had been denied it. There are other reasons, though, for companies to pay attention to these issues. A few years ago, I was talking to a woman from a global financial giant, and she told me that they had lost a key candidate, someone they wanted for the job at the company. And so they went to the woman and they said, "Can you tell us why you didn't come to us, you went to our competitor?" And her answer was, "When I did my research, the other company was known to be more hijab friendly." So talent is an issue for companies. It's not only money, they're losing talent when they don't address these issues. Well, we work with Fortune 500 companies, you heard some of the names. And we do a number of things with them. We work with management and employees. We brief management on why it's in their interest to address this issue. Because we want to motivate them with what is important to them. And what's important to them very often is getting money and their shareholders. So we are very frank. It helps business if you address this, besides being right. We help them to revise policies, to revise how they train their management and their employees, and what practices they will tolerate in the company. And we've identified 10 ways that religion tends to emerge in companies. It includes things that you guys probably know, think about every day. Attire. Companies with, dress codes. What is the dress code? What do you do when a man comes and says, "I've just converted to Islam and I want to grow a beard"? Because that's going to be part of my practice. And they say, "Well, we have a no facial hair policy here." What happens? Well, you can accommodate or not. What about scheduling meetings? Should the biggest board meeting of the year be scheduled on the Eid? Or maybe they could pay attention and not do it. The issues are nuanced. And I'm only going to give you pieces of a nuanced issue, like talk about prayer. Take a global company headquartered in the U.S. with an office in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, the majority of their employees are probably Muslim, and time is probably allotted in the day for prayer. It's probably built into the schedule. And the same company's U.S. office probably have a minority of observant Muslims in the company's office, and time for daily prayer is probably not at all part of the schedule or the regular routine. And then, you go to your manager, they very often don't know what they're supposed to say to you about that. Because the other employees are going to be annoyed. After all, you go to pray, that means you're like skipping out, not doing your work, not helping with deadlines. They're going to be annoyed at the time you take off. So they don't know what to do. We work with companies to address such issues. And when they can be addressed, we call it the accommodation mindset. You can have religiously respectful policies. In our prayer example, the company could implement entitlement to a prayer break, just like they have coffee breaks, to accommodate believers, provided, or added as extra time, provided that they make up what work has to be done and make sure the work is completed, and they make up the time. I believe that this is important for large and small companies, and that these issues need to be considered. Not every issue can be addressed. Sometimes the needs of the business and the needs of a religious employee may not easily be satisfied, both satisfied. There may not be a compromise. There are a lot of times that there can be. And when you do it, you'll attract better talent, you'll have higher morale among your employees, and if you train your employees as well as your management, which is something the Tannenbaum does, you can create an environment that is inclusive and respectful. So, just talked about 2 programs. I'm watching the clock, trying to kind of keep on track. It makes sense, right? We have a program in workplaces, a program in schools for teachers. Makes sense, that's where people spend their time. So why do we have a program in healthcare? Very simple, there's a gap. Lots of people, 41% of people, make decisions based on their religious beliefs in healthcare. And less than 1 in 10 physicians ever ask about it. That means that there are issues that are emerging in healthcare. People are not getting the right treatment sometimes, or the best treatment, and beyond that, sometimes people are self-selecting out of care, and the result is real-life impact that they're not getting routine care. This happened in Maine. In a largely Somali refugee community, the women were not going to the hospital or the doctors for regular care. The hospital got concerned. They wanted to figure out what was going on. So they started out by talking to some of their employees to figure out what was going on. And then they went into the community to ask. What they learned was the women didn't like the gowns. They said they were too skimpy. So the hospital did something very, very, radical. They created a new gown, long flowing pants, and a loose overtop that went down to the wrist. Guess what happened? Right, the women started going for routine care. Health costs went down because there were less emergencies. All made sense. And they got a loyal customer base. They know that that hospital is looking out for them. There are also issues around diet, medicine, and medical regimens. Another quick story, true story. Grandmother had valve replacement surgery, but she was failing. They were trying everything, and they could not understand why she was failing, but they knew she was going to die, so they finally called in her rabbi. After he left, she began to heal. Today she's fine. So what was going on? Well, it turns out that the valve had been made from porcupine. When the rabbi told this Orthodox Jewish woman that in Judaism, life is more important than following the rules of kashrut, she stopped feeling that she betrayed God and was willing to move on with her life. And that change in her attitude actually affected her ability to heal. Now that could have happened to a Muslim woman too. Islam forbids the eating of pork, and observant patients may not want food or medicines that come from pig. Now, maybe it would be nice if all the doctors and the nurses' aides and everybody knew all these rules, but that is not what we're suggesting, because that would be like a walking dictionary of comparative religion in your head all the time. And besides that, even if the text says that life is more important, you may have a person who doesn't believe that or doesn't know that. So what the text says is not what the doctors need to know. They need to be able to find out what's important to their patient. They need to know and understand that religion, remember, religion is a powerful force, and it affects what happens to people when they go to the doctor. And they need to know how to ask their patients respectfully when it's appropriate without proselytizing. And then they need to make the best decisions for their treatment. So with the Orthodox Jewish woman, who I was just telling you about with the valve, or if she'd been a Muslim woman, there was an alternative that could have been discussed up front. You don't have to use a porcupine valve. There are mechanical valves available, and that might have been her preference had that discussion never been had. a practical solution. So how do we change how healthcare is provided and what doctors ask? Very simple. Again, training. But we want to change this for the long term. So we're working on changing the curriculum in medical schools and residency programs. And we're just starting. We've got fairly far along in a residency program where we're actually doing a 5-year project to change their curriculum and train their doctors to train future generations of doctors in what we call religio-cultural competence. But we also need laws requiring that our doctors and our nurses have cultural competence and what we call a Tannenbaum religio-cultural competence, so that there can be ongoing training. New Jersey had such a law, and there was a period of time where it was required. Although I think it should be an ongoing requirement, because I don't think these things get learned so easily or get practiced so readily. In addition to this, you need resources. So this is a resource. Tannenbaum created the Medical Manual for Religio-Cultural Competence. It's a how-to, about 10 different traditions, and how within those different traditions people may, depending on who they are and how they practice, make decisions based in health based on their beliefs. It also helps providers figure out how to ask those questions and communicate. And it's an ebook now. We're very excited. It's on Amazon, so we're going big time. It's clear that we're very busy, and those 3 programs are the ones that are most likely to touch you guys here. Our 4th program only touches you if you look at yourself as a citizen of the world. It certainly touches me. It's our conflict resolution program, and it's based on our concern that religion is often used to inflame conflict, and because of that, diplomats rarely will work with religious leaders or trust them when they go into armed conflicts. Our conflict resolution program focuses on their counterparts, on the lesser recognized individuals whose religious beliefs actually move them to work for peace. The way we identify them is through 5 criteria and a worldwide search. We do it every 2 years, and then we select 2 peacemakers in action. And one of them, ladies, has to be a woman. The second one can also be a woman, by the way, if we get the right nominees. But one has to be a woman from somewhere around the world. It's called affirmative action, everybody. We just decided that we kept getting nominees who were men, and we decided we had to have women peacemakers recognized too, because they are doing the work as well. The 5 criteria: religiously motivated. That does not mean clergy, by the way. It means motivated by religion. Relatively unknown at the time of selection. Working in an armed conflict. Doing some work with the grassroots, locally based. And the 5th criterion, having put their lives or their freedom at risk. We've named 28 such individuals from 19 countries, including Israel and Palestine, Northern Ireland, Colombia, Nigeria, Sri Lanka, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Indonesia. To understand what they're like, I want to tell you about one of them. Friar Ivo Markovic from Bosnia. He's Catholic, a Bosnian Croat scholar, an accomplished musician, and a teacher. And he lived in the Franciscan monastery in Sarajevo when the war broke out. When that war began, he was a voice of reason, urging religious leaders not to bless the fighting, but to condemn it. But while he was working far from home, he got word that the Bosniaks, mostly Muslim, had gone into his village, and they had destroyed the entire village, burned his home, killed his father, his uncles, and over half of his parish. Eva's very honest, and so he'll tell you that what happened for him was that he became filled with rage and a desire for revenge. But he thought about his father, who was with him in the work for peace, and he decided that that was not to be his way, that he would work to stop the violence and the insanity. Like all of our peacemakers, he has a rare capacity to see the humanity in other people. And on one occasion, when there was a Christian holiday, a local Muslim village was attacked. And I want to say, and I could be wrong, but I think it was 1 million bullets were shot into the village that day. Ivo wanted to reach out to the imam. And as he set out to go in full friar frock, there were two opposing armies, and he had to walk between them. They were facing each other with guns. And they pointed those guns at him, and they told him to stop. And he looked at them, and he said, "What? Would you shoot me, you idiot?" And he kept walking. He found the imam, and that day they went to the commanders, and they each spoke to them. And the arms were put down, and no one died. You know, I talked to him about this recently. I said, "Remember you did this? It was so wonderful." He said, "That was in the beginning when you could do that." Friar Ivo is representative of our peacemakers, a local unsung hero of conflict resolution and peace building. So we work with him, and our program has two trajectories. First, we work directly with the peacemakers. Every couple of years we convene them for a working retreat where they know one another, because they're isolated. They work in these countries in silos all by themselves very often, often without the support of their religious communities, and they put themselves at risk every day. So they come to know one another, and we provide them with training, and they train each other. They've also created a new network, Tannenbaum's Peacemakers in Action Network, and we're now working with them to coordinate small groups of peacemakers to zoom in for interventions in armed conflicts around the world, bringing their separate skills, their talents, and frankly, their charisma and passion, and their interfaith approach. Some of them do interfaith work, to try to resolve those conflicts and do peace building. That's the work we do with them. The other work we do is we document what they do. We document it through texts, like this, case studies, used now to teach religious students and students of international affairs, hopefully to influence how diplomacy is done in coming years. We also do it through the Huffington Post, and yes, blogging on our website. We're working on our second book, and we're very excited about providing materials that share with the world what these people are doing and that they are a resource. Our objective is to institutionalize understanding around the world that religious peace building is work that many people can do, and that they need to be accessed as a resource. So that's Tannenbaum. You didn't get the elevator speech. I could have given it to you, but it would have been very short. It's very simple, really, what we do every day. We address the power of religion in practical ways, and we combat religious prejudice writ large. I want to thank you all